One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey folks, welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We're so excited to have you. Today on the show, we've got the VP of Global Sales from PandaDoc, Jim Donovan. Fantastic guest, really great guy, 20-year veteran of the sales industry, was also in the World Trade Center during 9/11, and that was kind of a pivotal moment in his life when he decided to embark on a career in sales. And we got to chat with him. He's down in St. Petersburg, Florida, managing a global team on the march to 100 million for PandaDoc. So really enjoyed that conversation. Now we've got a new sponsor. So let's before we dive into that episode, we would like to hear from these wonderful new sponsors. So the first new sponsor I want to tell you about is a company called Lupio. So if RFPs are slowing down your sales team, you need to check out Lupio. It's the leading RFP response software trusted by more than 800 high-performing organizations across North America. It automates the tedious parts of the response process, like filling in the right answers and formatting documents so you can finish RFPs in hours instead of days. See how Lupio can help you with your next RFP. Go to lupio.com/saleshacker to get a personal walkthrough today. I can tell you, having run enterprise sales organizations for complex technology, RFPs suck, and we would spend hours and oftentimes it was other people, the sales engineers and the compliance people, but man, they are a pain in the ass to complete. So really, I do encourage you to check out Lupio software. That is lupio.com/saleshacker. And we know who our second sponsor is. Our second sponsor is Outreach. They are the #1 sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined and customer-centric journey. Leveraging the next generation of artificial intelligence, the platform allows sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every single time, enabling personalization at scale previously unthinkable. Outreach produces industry-leading events like their Unleash virtual conference series, and that's what we're going to say about Outreach. Check them out, www.outreach.io. They are on their way to becoming a public company. They're a badass platform, and I think have been consistently rated as having some of the best technology within the sales engagement space. So I really do encourage you to check them out. Now, without further ado, I'd like you to listen to my interview with Jim Donovan, VP Global Sales, PandaDoc. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today, we're incredibly excited to have the VP of Global Sales for PandaDoc with us on the show, Jim Donovan. Let me tell you a little bit about Jim, and then we will get into the conversation. So Jim is a motivating sales leader with demonstrated success in generating organic revenue across the media, SaaS, finance, and mobile industries. He's a focus on sales enablement and sales ops skills combined with a proven metric-based SaaS model has generated over $1 billion in revenue across 5 major enterprises. He's hired, trained, and promoted over 1,500 professionals, and he is trustworthy, ethical, detail-oriented, team worker, confident, poised in interactions at all levels. He's a great leader. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sam. It's great to be here. Happy Friday, everybody.
We are excited to have you. So, Jim, you're the VP of Global Sales at PandaDoc. Many folks know what PandaDoc is, many folks don't. So, as we like to do, we like to start with the baseball card and just learn a little bit about the company. So, in your words, what does PandaDoc do?
Absolutely. So we are an all-in-one document generation platform, really fueling proposals, contracts, and we are quickly becoming one of the largest providers in the e-signature space, which has obviously been fueled by a ton of remote work over the last 6 months. So we're competing heavily with the likes of DocuSign, HelloSign, and providers of the such, but we're really proud of our technology, and the customer ratings are proving out that we've got a really sweet product to offer.
Awesome. And how big is the company from, you don't have to give us specifics, but sort of what stage of growth are you at?
We are definitely in pure growth stage. So we just exited our startup phase when we completed our Series B. We just got another 30 million in August, and we're now a 350-person organization with a growth trajectory to get to approximately 480 in just the next 6 to 9 months.
Oh, 480 people. Okay, fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, and how large is your sales organization?
84 of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. So, well, let's learn a little bit about you. So, I before we get there though, e-signature, document management, you just mentioned PandaDoc. I've been seeing PandaDoc come up more often, but for the sophisticated buyers out there, for the folks, because there are so many options, what does separate PandaDoc from a DocuSign, from a HelloSign, from the other options that are out there if I want to not just get e-signature, but sort of, do the complete document management that is needed in these remote times?
Absolutely. So one of the things I particularly as a sales leader love about our product is we give a hardcore dashboard where you can see all of the activity of your different divisions in one place. We also provide document analytics that are next to there's nothing like the analytics that we provide out there today. So where some providers like ClearSlide, might show you something like, hey, they're looking at this page and they're spending a considerable amount of time on this section of the page. We actually take our KPIs to the full next level, and we actually provide you insights that can help you understand whether messaging inside your proposals is generating conversions and wins, or if you should be changing up some of the formatting of your proposals to drive better success for your business.
Oh, that's cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's learn a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about your career. You're running a global sales organization, over 84 direct reports or reports. I'm sure they're not all direct, but how'd you get here? What's your background? You've got a really interesting life story. So let's have the audience hear it.
Yeah, sure. I started out my career as an investment banker on Wall Street. I went to Villanova University in the Northeast Corridor, and immediately, you graduate and you go right to Wall. That was the motion back then. Randomly, I was working for JP Morgan on September 11th, and I just happened to find myself in the World Trade Center on the morning of September 11th when the first plane hit. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I actually I swam the morning of September 11th on the rooftop pool of the Marriott Hotel that actually used to join the two towers at the lobby. And then, yeah, of course, we all know what happened next. For me, it actually became a massive pivot point in my entire life. So I ended up essentially exiting investment banking on September 12th. I decided it was not for me. And I had witnessed a lot of people, unfortunately, die jumping from the towers. And a lot came into focus for me quite quickly. So I left investment banking right after that. I actually left the New York City area as well and relocated down south. I went right to Texas, where I spent a handful of years. And then I went over to Atlanta for about 12 years. Now I've been here in St. Pete, Florida for the last, 7 years now. And I immediately got into sales management. So I knew I always wanted to be generating revenue. That was what I liked about Wall Street. And so I just pivoted from, generating money through money into generating revenue through products. And I just really loved people and working with people. And so I got into sales management pretty quickly with Earthlink Wireless. I pivoted that into a joint venture with a company called SK Telecom out of South Korea. And we did about a $250 million joint venture, which would then just sort of set me up on this path of creating inside sales orgs and eventually leading me to the place where I am today, which I've discovered my sweet spot is taking organizations from roughly anywhere from $5 to $20 million of revenue. And the blow up point of getting from there to 100 million has become my sweet spot. So I've been enjoying that for the last few years.
That's a good sweet spot to have. What do you think? Let's talk about your sweet spot. What do you think the keys are when you're, because you mentioned it yourself. You said, we're exiting startup phase based on closing your Series B. And a lot of companies would not consider themselves to have exited startup phase at Series B. They'd still very much think they're in the thick of it. But as an expert on somebody helping take people from essentially the end of startup phase to like maybe just pre-IPO phase, what do you think the keys are to that stretch of 20 to 100 million?
It's a great question. So, what I was so impressed about with PandaDoc and why I wanted to be a part of this organization is they had a growth plan that they had been really sticking to. And I think it's hard, but a critical point is if you're going to actually create a plan of how to get to a aggressive number like 100 million, you have to believe in that plan and you have to know that it's a living plan and allow it to fluctuate. But you can't abandon the plan. And that's one thing that I've noticed that PandaDoc has done a tremendous job of. They've stuck a laser focus on their growth plan. They allow failure to occur along the way, but they don't deviate from what we've known has made us successful. So what has made us successful are things like creating a predictable funnel, predictable revenue growth, conversion rates that we can rely on and lean into and build organizations on top of.
How do you build predictability? Everybody wants to do that. When you're the technician, when you're running the team that's appointed in part to drive predictability, what are your keys?
I start with, obviously, we have a top line number that we're working backwards from. If you don't have some type of activity model engineering you that helps you understand the exact tactics that are required to get to that revenue, you'll never get there. If you understand what one body can produce and start manufacturing how to get to that number appropriately, meaning you have to allow SDRs, account executives, AMs time to ramp. You cannot build a plan, and a lot of people make this mistake. They build a plan with bodies at full effectiveness on day one, and that's just not how salespeople work in any company. And so that's another factor we've done is not only have we created a strong activity underling model, we actually have allowed people to scale in that model. It factors in, for example, quarters of a body, a half body, 3/4 of a body, rather than just assuming a full FTE can start producing at 100% on day one, which you and I both know never happens. Beyond that, I'd also say org design and targeted talent hiring have been key to us. I am an example of that at PandaDoc. They actually spent a year and a half searching for my role. They could have settled on dozens of candidates prior to me, but they understood that they were looking for a particular person. They were looking for somebody that had done exactly what I've done time and time again. And then on the org design side, this is, I think, where you have a lot of fun. And Sam, I'm sure you're really familiar with, you got to move the pieces around on the chessboard, but you have to actually be able to lay out a vision of where you're going to end up at 100 million first, and then work backwards from that. I'm doing it right now, right? I know all the holes I'm plugging, and I don't have a lot of anxiety about whether or not I'm hiring the right people at the right time, because we have such a buttoned up RevOps plan to guide me. It actually triggers me at the exact right time, and it raises its hand for me and tells me I need to hire if I'm going to remain on plan. And I find that to be beyond invaluable, because my number one gotcha in the 4 build outs prior to this one was I was always behind on hiring, right? That's an easy thing to get behind on. So I'll stop there and see if that helps.
We talk a lot about this. I talk a lot about there's so many different ways to model. I have found, not only to underscore the point about ramp, but just in general, it really depends on the sales motion. But a lot of times people assume that hiring reps is the thing that drives revenue growth fundamentally, when it depends on what your assumption is about how much of the pipeline reps are producing themselves versus SDRs versus marketing and other activities. So talk about how well are you aligned with your marketing peer to make sure that your assumptions about where the pipeline is coming from are on track, so that you don't end up with a bunch of AEs that you've hired on time, but you don't have the pipeline to support those people and they don't have the deals to close.
Isn't that even worse? Because then that leads us down the path that we all know what that results in. So absolutely, my marketing partner and I, we're famously connected at the hip. Once a week, we sit through a gauntlet of what we call the funnel pipeline review, where we're looking at everything. What's the quality of our MQLs? How is the SDRs doing converting them? We provide approximately 70% of pipe to everybody, which I think is hyper generous. So we're really only needing to manufacture approximately 30% across the board. Also, we have the good fortune not just of, raising a Series B, but again, a strange effect of the pandemic has been our overall funnel has exploded with interest and curiosity. And quite honestly, we don't have the resources to handle the amount of demand coming at us. I think
that's a great problem.
It's honestly, Sam, I have this smirk on my face that I don't deserve to have, but you're absolutely right. I feel guilty over the last 6 months sharing that often, but I have to also step back and remember that, even in the worst of times, there are businesses that need to benefit, and how ideal for PandaDoc that our technology is at that intersection.
Yeah. You've mentioned that you have a sort of a strong point of view on whether or not SDR should be specialized versus hybrid. When you say specialized, do you mean inbound versus outbound? Talk about what your ideal SDR design structure is. And also, of course, there's that debate of who they should report to. So who do you think the sales development team should report to is another question I have for you.
That's a great question. I don't have a strong opinion on where they should report to as long as they're producing. I've noticed that the connectivity of the SDRs to the AEs generally produces a better result when it's in sales, just because there's greater connectivity from a one-to-one management perspective. But I've obviously operated in scenarios where marketing provided our SDR support, and that's worked out famously as well for me. I think it really comes down to the leadership over the specific functions. On the specialization one, again, this is almost a real-time thorn for me. I actually, Sam, you'll appreciate this. The Revenue Collective provides such amazing data that, not only do I contribute, but I go there so frequently to extract. And I had actually pulled a great SDR slide deck from there that y'all had put together. And I was using it as reference because I was really trying to understand the industry best practice there. And one thing I noticed from your deck was, 2/3 of companies don't specialize their SDRs. They really allow them to be hybrid, more or less. And when I was arriving at PandaDoc, we were specialized staunchly. And so I was kind of curious, is that an area of opportunity for us?
And when you say specialize on what industry, specialize on sales motion, tell me how you're defining specialization.
I'm sorry, great question. So pure specialization of inbound to outbound.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. And I just thought there was a little bit of room to experiment there. We did, and it was a failure, candidly. So I think what it matters, just to answer your question very directly, is you have to understand your organization before you make that decision. I can see a scenario, or what I prefer. Here's what I prefer. I like an inbound SDR that can handle, 90% of their volume, but that if they don't have that volume, they're still capable of generating some activity and generating some of their own volume, at least 10% of the time. But that hasn't worked out for us here at PandaDoc. We have actually gone right back to full specialization quite recently. And you can tell the team's energy and morale is heightened again because they prefer to just have the focus. And also the outbound, the makeup and the DNA of an outbound SDR, we're learning, is a little bit different than the DNA of an inbound SDR.
So the Revenue Collective deck said that 70% are hybrid?
It said that actually what it was, just so you know, it was a poll or one of your...
oh, gotcha.
Yeah. It was
a survey.
It was a survey, exactly.
Yeah.
And of I think it was 200 plus companies had responded. And of all the respondents that you had polled, 2/3 of them were not specializing. They were aiming to be hybrid. And so I thought...
It also might be a function of the volume of leads. If there's just not enough inbound leads, then it just might not be possible to have inbound versus outbound. But we're talking about something that's of great interest to me. So I have more questions.
Please.
So I don't know if it's a debate. It's a debate in my head. These are conversations with myself. On the one hand, you might say inbound SDR is junior, is less senior than an outbound SDR because the outbound sales motion is, I would say objectively, I think it's more difficult. It's more difficult to get somebody's interest. It's more difficult to have a meaningful ongoing conversation when they didn't reach out to you. Yeah. So on one hand, you might say the most junior people in the organization are going to start off as inbound SDRs. On the other hand, you could also say, and the marketing team might say, the most junior person in the organization is talking to the person that is closest to the finish line, that is the most important to us and most likely to buy. In fact, I want more senior people to be on the inbound side because I want the people that have their wallets out to be talking to our best salespeople, our best SDRs. What's your perspective on, or maybe there's a world where, you know what, they're just different skills. They're equal in terms of seniority. You can become an account executive or a director of marketing from either inbound or outbound. What is your overall perspective?
I think it's a great point. I think I'm going to answer by saying, I'm going to go back to the point you made, which is I do think it's dependent on two key things: volume and then deal value. So what kind of value are you getting from a conversion rate perspective from your inbound versus outbound? If they're on par, you can have a lot of fun there and you can play. Usually they're not on par, right? Usually you're seeing an actual difference in the overall ACV of one channel versus the other. So I love what you're saying, and I agree with you. I think that inbound SDRs are a great place to, to have a training ground. And typically what we've seen is our top producing inbound SDRs are the activity workhorses that are going to be the most successful if we transition them to outbound, because they're not afraid of activity. They're not afraid of rejection. They just want to be pointed at the problem, and then they want to go solve that problem. Ultimately, when we measured the success of all of our account executives, the one thing that jumped out at me is the longevity of somebody that has the outbound skill set. And I think this is an important tip for anybody in sales or anybody in sales management. You must, in my opinion, you must have some outbound skill set and some outbound rigor in your toolkit if you want to have longevity in sales. Meaning, when we measured the length of time in the position, what we noticed is an outbound focused SDR is going to last longer in the total ecosystem of the company than an inbound. So that's just one, interesting data point. It's not an end all be all, but I've always told my sales team, look, some days inbound dries up, right? Most of the time it's there, but sometimes it dries up. Do you want to be the person holding the bag when it dries up, or do you want to be equipped and capable of hunting and bringing home your quota? And they always, always, always want to be capable of it. Back to your point, though, that doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean that they're not afraid of it.
Yeah, it is difficult, and it's getting. We had, I think his name is Jeff Martin, the founder of Sapper Consulting, and he was saying on the show, every day is the easiest day it's ever going to be for sales development and for overall meeting generation, because the channels are getting clogged. People are turning on. They're not responding to LinkedIn. They're not even responding to text messages as much. What are you seeing in terms of just your, again, thinking about to the point of getting to predictable revenue, predictably hitting that plan of 100 million? What are the channels that are working really well for you and your team in terms of generating interest and awareness and conversion? Or do you feel like you're still just surfing the wave of COVID, everybody working from home? And like you said, it's just hiring as many bodies as you can to fill the demand.
Great question. So we're definitely no longer surfing the wave. In the beginning, one thing we did detect was call avoidance had declined significantly, right? So what we found at the beginning of the pandemic was everybody was freaked out about working from home. And so if their phone rang, they actually picked up. So we took advantage of that, and we actually upped our call volume, but we didn't see a massive lift in conversion rates. So we went back to our tried and true approach of an omni-channel, sort of making sure you're capturing them at all of their own conversion points. The one thing I will say has really sweetened and juiced our own performance has been the ability to get to the decision maker's mobile device and absolutely add SMS into the equation. I can't emphasize this enough. SMS is becoming a real game changer in understanding whether or not you have an actual there, right? Is the prospect real or not? And if you can strike up, one of the most intimate types of communication we have and get reciprocity on that, that is an amazing buying signal. By the way, you'll also get sometimes people will tell you to F off, don't text me again. But as you and I both know, that's okay. In sales, you just want to know where you stand. So we're definitely using an omni-channel approach, and we're getting into seasoning SMS quite a bit more than we ever have.
Well, that's awesome. Great insight.
Yeah.
Tenure. How long, again, I'm just thinking about SDRs because that's what we've been talking about. But when you look at the tenure of your team, and again, I'm just thinking about it again, because there's this part at the beginning of the company where, obviously you know the names of the people on your team anyway, but these are people that you feel this tight bond with because it's a tiny little company. Right. Over time, though, as you're trying to go from 20 million to 100 million, you have to have this expectation, not just about ramp period, but about employee turnover and employee retention. And also not just because, they're not happy or whatever, but because maybe the career paths that they want aren't always instantly available to them. What are you seeing in terms of tenure? How long do you think SDRs should be ready to sit in seat before they ask to be promoted? Just curious on, as we push through 2020 and into 2021, what the latest is in terms of, your reps and your team's patience and longevity when it comes to working on the team.
Such a great question. I was actually just building a slide earlier today as we're getting ready to do our Q4 kickoff early next week. And one of the things I was noting was, oh my goodness, I cannot believe, I've only been in my job here at PandaDoc for 6 months. And when I was looking back at just the last quarter, I was blown away that we have actually had 14 promotions inside of the last 3 months. I think I shared with you, my organization's only 84 people, right? So that's a good chunk of our org moving up into the right pretty quickly.
Almost 20%.
Almost 20%, right. So very exciting. I can't wait to share it with the team. What we have and what I recommend to everybody out there that works really well. This has worked for me for 20 plus years. And, let's see, at iHeart, I think my attrition rate was probably 5 or 6%. At CBeyond, it was approximately 8%. But when you talk about managing turnover, that's obviously a critical metric. Here's how
those numbers are very low.
They're extremely low. And trust me, the reason I share them is because, at iHeart, great example, advertising, media sales, the turnover for the core sales division was probably 40%. So for me to be able to operate at 5%, we always wanted to understand what were we doing differently. And it was simply one thing. At the beginning of any new hire, we would actually show them something we called a progression model. And the progression model was a plain and simple, a career path. I don't think SDRs should be in the seat for longer than a year, but I think it's a mistake to punt them out of the seat before the end of a year. And that happens a lot, right? Because the motion for an SDR is, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to learn to develop some pipe, and then as quickly as we can get you into an AE seat, we'll get you there. So what that does is it sets them up to come in with this passive expectation of promotion at any minute, rather than saying to them, hey, you're going to be butt in seat for a minimum of 12 months, which I think is the right turnaround. If you then show them that progression model and help them see a minimum of a 5-year career path, complete with salary bumps and title changes, and if you do that up front, we all know how salespeople's brains are wired. We're not overly complex creatures. So if you show a map in the beginning, normally what happens is they'll look all the way to the right on the map and see what that last promotion is. And this is where the model comes alive. The last promotion is what we always call a sales contract. We all know how sales contracts work. That basically means, if the company gets purchased or the entity dissolves, you as a salesperson are still included in that dissolution. You are accounted for. And so we always like to show people that, in the course of 5 or 6 years, they can get to that state where they're almost treated at the same level as an executive. And all they have to do is generate, a few $1 million. And I will tell you, it has worked famously for me. In fact, when I first joined Revenue Collective, it was one of the first things I published in there was my progression model. And I got a ton of feedback from people that I know are using it out there today. So I'll get in there.
Oh, that's awesome.
I reshare it just in case it's valuable coming up with this podcast.
Yeah, I want to see it. So I actually didn't know that term, sales contract, but so it's like at the end of the 5 years, do you have a VP title on there or you don't, and do you prescribe management track, or you're just like, account executive, senior account executive, enterprise account executive, then you get to work on 7-figure deals, stuff like that. Is that how you structure
it? That's exactly it, right? So it goes from, junior SDR to SDR, junior account executive to senior to enterprise, and then contract. And all along the way, you're getting, increased levels of training. So as you get more to enterprise, you might be experiencing like Dale Carnegie, whereas in the beginning, you're probably getting exposure to Sandler. But the whole point of the contract is it's more of an ego thing, Sam, more than anything, right? It's, hey, I got a contract. Contracts are even meaningless in some cases for executives. When the rub comes down, sometimes the contract doesn't matter either. But it is this idea of aspiring to a place in the sales org that really ends up fueling them from a perspective of, do I want to stay here? Do I want to be committed to this place? And if you have a progression model, at least they can visualize themselves there beyond the SDR seat. And if you don't, I find you can often lose them right there in that pivot point between SDR and AE.
It's great insight. That 12-month number you mentioned that's right. That is exactly the controversial number. Trish Bertuzzi says, or I've seen research from the Bridge Group, that if you promote them before 12 months, there's a 60% failure rate. And if you promote them after 12 months, there's a 60% success rate or whatever. It's like the inversion of it. So something about pushing people into the role too quickly is definitely detrimental.
It is. It really is.
Jim,
well, hey, it's like a gap year, right? It's like when people graduate high school and they're not ready to start college. Just take a little time off, right? Go experience the world before you get pushed into something you're not ready for.
Well, certainly if you're going to borrow money and go to a second tier school, that's especially true, because you don't want to go into debt to, go to a place that you're not going to make use of. My last question for you is, you've been down, because we are almost at the end of our time together, but the last substantive question I have for you is just really around, is PandaDoc completely remote? Because you mentioned that you've been in St. Pete for 6 years.
Yeah.
I think that COVID probably made it completely remote, but was that always the intention, that, you're able to run this 100-person global team from a beautiful place in Florida?
I'm pretty lucky, I have to say. No, that wasn't we had a hub here. We always intended to have a hub here. Most of our engineering and product teams actually operate out of Minsk, Belarus. And Minsk has actually been going through, Belarus specifically, has been going through a ton of political turmoil. Strangely enough, in August, there was an election there. Lukashenko is the last dictator in Europe, and he lost that election pretty horribly, but he's having a hard time accepting those results. So at any rate, what it's done for our company is it's not only helped us decide on going remote first, it's pivoted us into a place where we must become remote first overnight. At first, it was really scary, Sam. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I'm a sales leader, right? So I'm used to walking around, high-fiving, we get a big deal, we hug, and all of a sudden I had to figure out, how do you establish those types of connections in this vastly remote setting? I do find it harder. It definitely is a lot more exhausting because you have to overextend yourself to create that connectivity. But at the same time, when I step back and look at my personal productivity, it's through the roof. I can't get over how much I think we're all working, possibly too much. I like a couple things about going remote first. First off, it's already opened us up to brand new talent that we never would have been able to access prior to being remote first. We're seeing people get excited immediately, and they're moving instantly all over the country and frankly, all over the world, because they now are understanding this isn't just a PandaDoc shift. This is a global shift, and we're making the conscious decision to take advantage of it. So we have people right now that are moving to Lisbon and Poland, and throughout the United States. Everybody is dispersing wherever they've always wanted to be. And so we think what we're going to find in the next 6 to 9 months is a much happier workforce operating from where they've always wanted to be. And our challenges will now become, what technologies are we going to invest in to connect people? How are we going to run things like, President's Club? And what are we going to do about those old trips that we used to run to the Bahamas or Greece? What replaces that? But I think that'll just birth a bunch of creativity, and we'll solve it in fun ways. So I'm excited about it. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. And it's a crazy time. What have you found in terms of just maintaining motivation and morale from a remote perspective? What's worked for you? Right? Competitions. Some people are doing like MTV Cribs, where like different people show people around their apartments and things like that. What's been keeping the spirits high at PandaDoc?
I like that a lot. Actually, one thing I've started to do over the last 3 to 4 months, I'm not going to lie, it takes a good chunk of my time on one of the last business days of the month. So depending on how your organization is scaling, I wouldn't recommend this to every sales leader, but what I've been doing that has really been helping is I actually make it a point on the last 1 or 2 business days of the month to call or Zoom link every single one of my employees to make a connection and say thank you. It gives them, maybe 3 to 5 minutes of one-on-one time with me as the VP each month, but they've all echoed to me how special and motivating it is that I call them just to say thank you. And I think it's those kinds of small things that we've got to figure out how to do more of, because, connection still matters. Being remote doesn't mean we're disconnected. We just have to figure out how to stimulate those connections differently. We've also been doing things like virtual happy hours. Those were really popular in the beginning. We've done virtual cooking classes. We did, painting rocks with the kids. So, we're definitely trying everything we can to pull out all the stops. But I'm not going to lie. I'm looking forward to a year or two from now when I can just invite my team to go have a beer and not have a mask on. That's going to be fun.
That will be fun. Well, definitely keep wearing your mask, especially given the news today.
I know. I saw it.
Unbelievable. So the last thing we like to do before we go is just get a feel for your influences. Could be books that you really have had an impact on you. Could be mentors. Could be coaches. Who, if you wanted to give us some ideas or people that you think we should know about, what comes to mind?
Definitely. So first off, I've been really fortunate to have two spectacular coaches in my career. A gentleman named Brent Cobb. He's a president of a software company in Atlanta. I also at one point had a mentor that was a former CIA agent. The reason I share this is that mentor taught me some of the most important skills as a sales leader. He taught me about intonation, body language, word choice, and eye movement. Again, I know that falls into body language, but really, I have a master's in organizational behavior. I'm striving to get my PhD in it. And understanding how people are actually feeling versus what they're telling you, I find to be one of the critical things that has set me apart as a leader. I can read through the bullshit is the best way I can say it, much better than I used to be able to. A book that I rely heavily on, and this is kind of campy, Sam, but I'm sure you've heard of it. It's by an author named Og Mandino, and it's called The Greatest Salesman in the World.
It's very famous. It's not that campy. Yeah,
it is. Here's the thing about it. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you actually read the book and you do the exercise in the book, that means that you're doing the exercise for 300 days, almost a full year, essentially 10 months. You are reading through these scrolls that are designed to kind of program your brain to think positively, act positively, and be positive. And I've done it twice now in my 20-year sales career, the 300-day exercise. Each time I've done it, it has not only transformed my career and my income, it's actually transformed my life. So I recommend it highly. It's hard. The scrolls, it's 10 scrolls. And the idea is you're supposed to read them 3 times a day. First in the morning, once at lunch, and then at night you read it aloud before you go to bed. And it just reprograms your brain to think differently. And I really like the way it makes me feel and the way it makes me think after I'm done with it. So I highly recommend it to anybody looking just for a fresh start.
That's awesome. There's so many of those old books where some people that we just know the names of them, and so they sound cheesy, and then you actually read them, and then they can really have a powerful impact. The book that jumps to mind for me is Napoleon Hill's famous Think and Grow Rich, which is very similar to Og Mandino. It's all about your mindset. It's all about visualization and putting yourself in the spirit of abundance, and then it all starts coming to you. Anyway, Jim, it's been great having you on the show. If folks want to reach out to you, because it sounds like things are going amazing at PandaDoc, and maybe they want to work with you or for you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Always feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My mobile number is published out there, and it's one of the easiest mobile numbers ever to you can text me on or call me. I'm happy to connect.
Awesome. And I'm looking at your mobile number right now, and you're right, it is fairly easy.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Multiples of 4.
It's like it looks like computer code, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Jim, thanks so much for being on the show. We've loved having you, and I'll talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals.
Sam, it's been terrific. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, Sam's Corner. Really enjoyed that conversation with Jim Donovan. You can tell he's a good guy, and he's also somebody that really has a lot of experience in that stage of 20 to 100 million. And I think, we spent a lot of time talking about the sales development team, some of the tidbits that came out, SMS as a really important channel, if both for all of the reasons, right? Because if you are pissing off that person, then at least you know where you stand. But for the people that you can generate reciprocity with, what a clear signal that you've got meaningful engagement with the decision maker. So if you're not using text in your sequences, then I would urge you to do so. The second thing is just talking about progressions and development. And he presents a 5-year career journey to the person joining the PandaDoc organization. I just think that's brilliant. And that's because that's what we all need. We people say that's what the youngsters need. Young people need rewards and incentives. Everybody needs that stuff. I've never understood when, the coaches are for professional teams are saying, well, they're grown men or grown women. They don't need any inspiring talk. Of course they do. Doesn't matter how many millions of dollars you make. You need to be inspired. You need to feel like you're moving towards some important goal. And that's what this career progression path, that's what it helps the employees of PandaDoc do. It helps them visualize the next steps in their journey so that they can contextualize, put the activities they do on a daily basis into context. And I can tell you that doing shitty, boring stuff every day is much more palatable if you know that you're moving towards something inspiring and meaningful, that you are on a journey that will encompass accomplishments over the course of some period of time. So those are my thoughts. I really enjoyed having Jim on the show. Now, without further ado, we want to thank, of course, our sponsors. The first one I think you remember, but just in case you don't, this episode was brought to you by Lupio. Lupio. Think about that. If your teams respond to RFPs, you need to try Lupio's intelligent platform. It helps hundreds of sales teams answer RFPs in hours instead of days. Sign up for a personal walkthrough of Lupio today. Your sales team will thank you. Trust us. Go to lupio.com/sales hacker. Lupio.com/sales hacker. Do that anyway if you like the Sales Hacker podcast, because that lets Lupio know that their dollars are being well spent. Second sponsor is, of course, Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. If you want to reach out to me, you can. LinkedIn.com/sales hacker. If you're listening to this right now, we're nearing the end of October. It's been awesome October for Revenue Collective. We're running our largest membership drive to date. We've got group memberships that we're rolling out for teams. So if you're a manager out there and you've got teams of people, this is an incredible professional development opportunity to enroll your directors and high-performing individual contributors and even your VPs into Revenue Collective for a group discount. They get personalized onboarding, they get specialized personalized resources, and we're really building out this concept of Revenue Collective for teams. So if you're interested in that, revenuecollective.com. Otherwise, I will talk to you next time.